Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsay, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of SuperPsyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. SuperPsyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. Expectations seem to come at us constantly. Some of those expectations are internal, meaning they come from inside ourselves. And sometimes they are external, meaning they come from others. How do you tend to respond? Are you a self-starter who's likely to uphold those expectations? Perhaps you meet expectations when they come to you from others, but it's harder for you to do so when they are self-imposed. Maybe you find yourself questioning expectations no matter who they come from. Or similarly, no matter who they come from, you might find yourself rebelling against those expectations. My guest, Gretchen Rubin, looks at how we tend to respond to expectations in her book, The Four Tendencies, the indispensable personality profiles that reveal how to make your life better and other people's lives better too. I am deeply impressed by Gretchen and her work. In addition to being a Yale-educated attorney who has worked with Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, Gretchen has written multiple books that have sold millions of copies worldwide. I love the Four Tendencies and the personality descriptions of each. It is simple and immediately practical, and it has been helpful to me in understanding how we humans operate. Echoing my sentiment, SuperPsyched guest Dr. Judson Brewer said, "When we know our tendency, we can manage ourselves more effectively and reach our goals faster, and we can help others to do that as well." So listen in as Gretchen and I talk about how we respond to expectations. I am confident you'll find it as useful as I have. Gretchen Rubin, welcome to SuperPsyched.
Oh, I'm so happy to be talking to you.
Likewise, I'm a fan of your work. I love that you've really geeked out to happiness. And when you suggested that we do the Four Tendencies as a personality typology geek, I was thrilled to actually talk to the person who came up with it. That's a really vast pursuit. And I'm guessing there might have even been moments where you thought to yourself, oh my gosh, I've bit off more than I can chew. This is a big one. Can you tell me the genesis of how did this even come about?
Well, coincidentally, my kind of epiphany moment was having lunch with a friend, and I literally had lunch with that friend today. This is so full circle. So by way of background, what had happened was I was writing a book about habit change, Better Than Before, which is all about how we can make or break habits. And I started to notice these patterns in how people talked about habits, how they made habits. And I felt like there was something deeper below the surface, and I couldn't figure out what. I would often say to people, how do you feel about New Year's resolutions? Because that's just sort of that gets people talking about habits. And a certain group of people would say exactly the same thing. They would say, I keep a resolution when it's important to me. I would not wait for January 1st because January 1st is an arbitrary date. And they would use that word arbitrary. And that was interesting to me because the arbitrariness of it never really bothered me. But for them, this was like a major thing. And they always use that word. And then there was I was talking to a person at a cocktail party and I said, oh, I'm writing a book about habits. And she literally stepped back from me in horror. And she was like, oh, why would you write a book about such a horrible subject? And I thought, that is so strange because to me, the subject of habits feels energizing and exciting and interesting. That's why I'm writing a book about it. But clearly, she was feeling something different. But the key moment, and this is the friend that I had lunch with today. So I was asking her about her habits, and she said to me something that I couldn't forget. She said, here's the weird thing about me. I know I'm happier when I exercise. And when I was in high school, I was on the track team, and I never missed track practice. So why can't I go running now? I can't stick to it. And I thought, well, why? At one time, it was effortless. Now she can't do it. Why? And there's a million reasons. You and I could come up with all of these hypotheses. But what is really at the essence of it? And you say, was this a hard thing to do? Well, the thing is, I didn't know what I was creating. People are like, why was it 4? I didn't know there would be 4. It turned out there were 4, but I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't know if things actually fit together. I couldn't see the whole pattern. I could just feel that there was something there. And then I was thinking about all this. I was sitting in the desk right where I'm sitting right this second as I speak to you now. And all of a sudden, the word expectation just flooded into my mind. It was like it leaped off the screen into my head. And I thought, that is the key. The key is, how do you respond to expectations? So we all have outer expectations, like a work deadline, and we all have inner expectations, like my own desire to get back into meditation. And I realized that whether you meet or resist outer and inner expectations, that's what makes you an upholder, a questioner, obliger, or rebel. Now, once I had that like key insight, it took me much longer to understand sort of a lot of the nuances that I later started to understand. And I began to understand that this all fit together even more perfectly than I had thought at first. Like, I feel like I invented like the periodic table of the elements or something. It works out so perfectly. But that was the key moment. The key moment was her saying that and me understanding, okay, she has an issue with expectations. When others expect something from her, her team and her coach, she has no problem. But when she's just having an expectation for herself, she's struggling. And that was the key insight that led to the Four Tendencies.
And I love it. It feels very much like a puzzle that you solved.
It was, but I didn't even know there was a puzzle there. Maybe there wasn't a puzzle. It was like an invisible puzzle. Yes. Once I had some of the pieces, then I began to fit more of the pieces together much more easily.
Well, and to go a little meta and to help the listener with their expectations, what are the four types in short? I thought they were so perfectly created, by the way.
Good. Yeah. Well, I'll describe them very briefly, and most people know what they are right away. Like, they're really obvious once you know. Like, you could do Game of Thrones characters. You could do The Office. Like, they're everywhere. Mad Men. But there is a quiz. If you want to take a free quick quiz online, if you go to GretchenRubin.com, you can take the quiz. And I don't know, 3.5 million people have taken the quiz. But
and by the way, I did it last night with Parks and Recreation, just to let you know.
Oh, that's great, because I can do Parks and Recreation.
It really works well.
Oh, Ron Swanson is such a questioner who tips to rebel. It is like he is. And Leslie Knope is an upholder.
She's such an upholder.
And who's Aubrey Plaza? What's the name of her character?
She's, hang on
April.
a second. April Ludgate.
April is a rebel, and her husband is an obliger, because rebels always pair up with obligers. I mean, it works for Mike Schur, who created it. He is an upholder. I interviewed him, and all of his shows have the four tendencies embedded in them, because these are just part of what you see in human nature. It's like you don't have to know about the four tendencies for them to show up, because this is just a very consistent pattern. But anyway, I love that you were watching Parks and Rec. Yes. Donna is a rebel.
Right, and Chris Traeger's got to be an upholder.
Chris Traeger, oh my gosh. Bananas upholder, right?
Bananas.
And he's got everything you see. Rigidity. He's got all the pros and cons. But anyway, so before we get into that, I'll explain what they are. Okay. So it's four types: upholders, questioners, obligers, and rebels. And sometimes people think, well, which one is the best one? Or which one is the most creative? Or which one makes the best leader? And what you see is that every type has strengths and weaknesses. And the people who are the most able to achieve their aims for themselves are the people who recognize their tendency and work with it, that figure out, well, how do I shore up my weaknesses and harness my strengths and make the most of my tendency, rather than saying, oh, I wish that I were this or that, because I can name you people who are wildly outstanding who are all four. Okay, so upholders are people who readily meet outer and inner expectations. They meet the work deadline. They keep the New Year's resolution without much fuss, like Chris Traeger. They want to know what other people expect from them, but their expectations for themselves are just as important. They're self-starters. They don't need a lot of accountability. They tend to be very focused on like execution. They can be rigid. And so their motto is, discipline is my freedom. Leslie Knope, also an upholder. Then there are questioners. Questioners question all expectations. They'll do something if it makes sense. So they're making everything an inner expectation. If it meets their inner standard, they'll do it no problem. If it fails their inner standard, they will push back. They need reasons, justifications. They tend to love data and research. They tend to love to like track and monitor. They want to customize, because they're always trying to get things to make the most sense, to be the most efficient. They can sometimes have analysis paralysis, because their desire for perfect information makes it hard for them to move forward. So their motto is, I'll comply if you convince me why. So this is Ron Swanson. He follows all the rules about hunting, right? Because he thinks it's dangerous and important, but then other things he disregards because he's like, it doesn't make sense. Then there are obligers. Obligers readily meet outer expectations, but they struggle to meet inner expectations. This is the biggest tendency. This is the one that the most number of people belong to, both men and women. You either are an obliger or you have many obligers in your life. They readily meet outer, but they struggle to meet inner. So these are the people who say, why can I keep my promises to other people, but I can't keep my promises to myself? And the key insight for obligers is it's not a matter of willpower or motivation or self-care or making yourself a priority or keeping your promises to yourself. It's about outer accountability. To meet an inner expectation, an obliger must have a form of outer accountability. If you want to run more, join the track team or run with a friend who'll be disappointed if you don't show up, or raise money for a charity, or take your dog for a run who's so disappointed if she doesn't get to go, or think of your duty to be a role model for somebody else. There's a million ways to create outer accountability. And if you are an obliger, that is the key thing that you need. They make great leaders, great team members, great friends, great neighbors, because they are the ones who are most willing to go the extra mile. I've had people tell me that they want to screen for obligers. They only want to hire obligers because they're so valuable. But if you're an obliger, you get very frustrated because you're not keeping your promises to yourself. So that's what you do, outer accountability. So their motto is, you can count on me, and I'm counting on you to count on me. And then finally, rebels. This is the smallest tendency. It is a conspicuous tendency, but it is a small tendency. And rebels resist all expectations, outer and inner alike. They want to do what they want to do in their own way, in their own time. They can do anything they want to do. They can do anything they choose to do. But if you ask or tell them to do something, they are very likely to resist. And typically they don't like to tell themselves what to do. I remember talking to a guy where he's like, I decided I was going to give up bread. And then the next day I ate an entire loaf of sourdough because nobody tells me what to do, not even me. And so their motto is, you can't make me, and neither can I. So those are the four tendencies. If you are thinking, I question the validity of this framework, you're probably a questioner. If you are thinking, I am all four, you are also probably a questioner because you are thinking, well, if something makes sense to me, I'll do it like an upholder. But if it doesn't make sense to me, then I wouldn't do it. I would be a rebel. What are you doing? You're saying, I will do it if I see why. And that is the heart of being a questioner. And Adam, I think you said that you're a questioner.
I am not. I am actually, yeah, you would think so because of your husband being a questioner versus you. I believe myself to, well, I know I took the inventory. I'm sorry, an obliger, 100%.
You're an obliger. Okay, well, that's good because for people who are like teaching or helping others, I think it can be an advantage to be an obliger because you understand the perspective that and the challenges that are the most broadly experienced. And so like I'm an upholder that's only slightly larger than rebel. And a lot of times I think, well, sometimes upholders aren't very good at giving helpful advice because a lot of times with habits, a lot of upholders are like, just make up your mind and do it. Make a list and follow through. And I'm like, have you met people? This doesn't work for most people. It works for a very small number of people. So I think it can be an advantage to be an obliger because you understand the biggest perspective and the challenges that the largest number of people are facing.
And I do think it does help me as a psychologist, but it doesn't help me as somebody who wants to take care of myself. So I really fall behind there. And it's funny because I believe that I'm married to, she hasn't yet taken it, but I believe she's an upholder. And my father most certainly is. And both of them, almost in a chorus, are just like, it's Nike, just do it.
Can I say that one of the faults that you often see among upholders, and I say this for myself, is that they can be very judgmental and not very helpful or compassionate because they will sort of say like, well, if it's important to you, just do it. If it's not important to you, stop talking about it. I don't want to be your babysitter. Just go ahead. And it's like, okay, but you're not understanding that it's just not that straightforward for other people. And so sometimes upholders have to understand that they can't just say to people, just deal with it. This kind of coldness is something that you do sometimes see with upholders. And I think that's why it can be helpful to have this framework because you can say like, well, this is why this is easy for you. It's easy for you to get up and exercise in the morning every day. But for me, I need some kind of accountability. So let's figure out how I can get what I need so that I can follow through just as consistently as you. I just need like another extra element to that practice.
One of the things I love about this framework is I can see how the human species evolved all four. All four were necessary for the tribe to survive.
Yes, exactly. It's true.
Can you imagine if we were just all one thing? We would die. We need a string quartet. We need a barbershop quartet. We need different voices to do different things, to carry out different tasks. And I'm so grateful to be married to an upholder. My life is just so much better than it would be because she is actually able to tap into the part of me that will eventually come around for myself. But it does take more pokes, and it does take those external. One of the things that I discovered in college as somebody with dyslexia and ADHD, I'd gone into college, I realized I needed to form a relationship with a professor who would take interest in my intellectual development. And so what I proposed to Dr. Greenberger was once a week, we choose a book. He chooses a book for me. I read it and we discuss it. And he grills me on it. Now, that was something I needed because I hadn't been able to attend. I needed exposure to reading. And I knew I needed that accountability. I needed a Mr. Miyagi.
Comment on that. So one of the things that I'm interested in is like, what is the least necessary dose? What is the least thing that is necessary? So what you've sort of said, I need accountability, I need a personal relationship, and I need somebody to take an interest in my intellectual development. I would say, what if you can't find someone like that? What if there isn't anybody who's going to take an interest in your intellectual development? I would say as an obliger, just the external accountability would be enough. It might not be as satisfying. It might not be as meaningful. But sometimes obligers are like, but I can't get somebody to give me all these things. And I'm like, but all you need is outer accountability. Or like sometimes people will say, well, I'm an introvert. And everybody keeps telling me to go to an exercise class. But at the end of a long day of work, the last thing I want to do is go to a group of people and have everybody talking and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you don't have to be in a class. That is not necessary. That is a form of accountability, but it's only one among many forms of outer accountability. Let's find you an outer accountability system that doesn't require you to interact with other people. Because there are many outer accountability forms where you don't have to make conversation. Because sometimes I worry that people, like, they wrap so much into it that then it's harder to get the outer accountability where literally all you need is the outer accountability. And so you could have had a big jerk as a professor who wasn't going to do any of that stuff to help you, but still could have served that function for you. Because I think even with a lot less engagement, you could have gotten a lot out of it just from the sheer accountability. What do you think? Do you think that's right?
I think that is generally correct. I think that given where I was at that age, the homeopathic dose, the lowest dose possible, would have needed to have included a modicum of interest in me. I needed to know that there was a relationship. However, I think that the question and the frame or the lenses through which you're viewing this, what is the least necessary in order to achieve this? I think that's the right question.
Yeah, good. Because outer accountability is so different among obligers. Like some signing up for a class works. For some, they're like, oh, but I can just not go. And then somebody else can take my place. And that's great. Or for some, paying money matters. It helps. But then for other people, if they pay money, they almost feel like they're let off the hook. So you really have to figure out what's right for you. But some obligers have said that they need an accountability that feels positive. They need like some form of like engagement or like a positive form of accountability. Like, oh, I want you to show up. That if they feel like the accountability is kind of punishing or judgmental, that then they turn off. So that's a really important thing to know about yourself. And so if you were at a state in your life where you're like, I need accountability, but I need a warm accountability. I need somebody who's holding me accountable because they care about me. Well, that's a higher bar. But maybe at that point, you're like, that is the necessary dose of accountability that I need. But then at a different time of your life, you're like, hey, you know, I can just, maybe you remember what it's called. There's this thing online where you can like sign up and people do like silent work, but you're like on camera. So people know that you're like on, and it's like, who cares? A bunch of strangers, they don't care if you're blowing it off or not, or if you're actually doing it, but that's enough. And I'm like, they don't care about you. They don't even know your name, but it's just the idea like, oh, we're in this together. Like you're working, I'm working, we're holding each other accountable. That's enough. At a different time, that could be enough for you. I'll just sit here and read my book. And the fact that I know that they're working and I'm working, that'll do the trick. But then at another time, something else was required. So that is also a really good point, which is your form of outer accountability might not be the same as somebody else's because some people can almost have like what I would call almost an imaginary form of accountability, like a duty to a future self, right? That's me in the future. Is that different from me now? Well, in my imagination, maybe yes, that is a kind of distanced self. Or what's another kind of imaginary? Here's a beautiful one. Somebody was saying how, okay, you said you sort of have trouble taking care of yourself. Her mother had died many years ago, and she would think of, well, what would my mother want for me? My mother would say, oh, honey, get a massage. My mother would say, oh, honey, you need to go to bed. You can skip that. You can tell them that you're not feeling well. You can stay home. Oh, honey, you need to take a vacation. And in her mind, her mother was the voice that was holding her accountable to take care of herself, even though her mother had been dead for such a long time. I love that. Yes. And so again, it's like this can take so many different forms, and like the creative ways that obligers come up with accountability, it just blows me away. I keep this incredibly long list. It's extraordinary, like what they find. The imaginary voice of your mother who died when you were a little kid can now guide you as an adult in terms of like self-care. Yes. Because that's the human imagination and how much that can influence our behavior.
And I love how George Lucas really conjured that up with Luke Skywalker, who heard Obi-Wan Kenobi's voice after he had died.
Yeah.
And he was able to access that voice. You're not just grasping at straws, you're grasping at real, firm, strong roots that will help an obliger or other people who want to cultivate a better connection to themselves and what they're hoping to foster in their lives. This is the difference between living a more fulfilled life versus not. So this is really important work, Gretchen, that you did and are continuing to do. I would like to go to something really hilarious, though, because there was you finished the book describing well-intended and signs that are meant to instruct humanity and society to keep things in order, and how some of them are written to a particular type and some of them are written to more than one type and some are written to all types, but not being attentive to the recipient and their tendency.
Yes.
Could be disastrous.
Yes.
Could actually get the opposite to occur. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing some of these signs to whom they speak and to whom they don't speak, and maybe one that might speak to everyone.
Yeah, that's next level. That's the hardest thing. I was involved with an organization and I was in the bathroom of this place and there was a sign, this incredibly long sign with all these instructions about like how to behave in the bathroom.
Oh my God.
And I was like, this is so obliger because they're just like, I'm so annoyed. Everybody's just behaving so badly. I don't understand why they're doing this. Like, let me just tell you, you can just feel the resentment. And I'm like, okay, a rebel is going to look at this and laugh and like rip it up and throw it in the trash. And an upholder is just going to roll their eyes and be like, of course I'm going to do all these things. A questioner is like, who are you to tell me what to do? And like, why, like, yeah. And I would love to have a coffee table book that is the signage from office kitchens, because you see all the four tendencies completely at play in office kitchens. One thing I have noticed more and more is that more and more signs are explaining why they are asking you to do that. And I don't know if that's sort of like organizational psychology is showing that this is very effective. This goes straight to the questioner tendency, but I think everybody is interested to know why something is not arbitrary. But like, do not feed the birds, because if you do, they will lose their natural ability to hunt for food and that will ultimately hurt them, or whatever it might be. Or do not open this door, an alarm will sound. Okay, you're going to have a consequence if that door opens. It's not like just don't open, because I have seen so many obligers just like walk straight up to a door that says do not open. And they're like, let's open this door and see what's on the other side. I'm like, oh no, don't. So I think signs where they explain why are more effective, often because you get the upholders, you get the obligers, and you get the questioners. And then often rebels, because rebels are often very civically minded or very values driven. They're going to do something because they want to do it, not because you told them to do it. But if they care about wildlife, which they very well might, then they're going to say, well, I would like to feed the birds, but I'm not going to, because one of my values and my identity is that I respect wildlife and I don't want to interfere with their natural patterns. And so I will choose not to do something that I wanted to do, not because you're telling me to, but because I understand that that's the best thing to uphold my own values. And so they're doing the same thing, but they're coming at it from a different place. So whenever I speak, especially when I speak to business groups, they're often say to me, Gretchen, let's be real. Like you're saying, I have to tailor all of my remarks to upholders and questioners and obligers and rebels, and I don't have time for that. I need to be able to communicate succinctly to all four. And I'm like, well, that's really hard to do because a lot of times the thing that will appeal to a rebel is not going to appeal to an upholder. And sometimes you do have to have different ways of communicating with the different tendencies because it's going to be more effective. Like if you're asking somebody to attend a weekly mandatory staff meeting, I would tailor that to somebody's tendency if at all possible. But I do think there is one campaign, a public service campaign, that appeals so perfectly to all four tendencies. It is so effective. It is so cogent that it is still remembered, even though it appeared decades and decades ago and hasn't been in like wide circulation for decades. Everybody knows this message because it resonates with all four tendencies. And that is the message: only you can prevent forest fires.
Oh, so good.
It goes to upholders, it goes to questioners, it goes to obligers, and it goes to rebels. Only you can prevent forest fires. And it just has that chill that you get when you're like, okay, that really rings true. But I will say that is very hard to do because it's very hard to communicate if you've got sort of a complicated message like, we all need to get on board with the new software from corporate. It's like, you're not going to come up with like a one-liner because the questioner's going to be like, wait, I don't understand. This doesn't make any sense to me. This isn't as good as the software we have now. My mind is blown. No, I'm not going to cooperate. The upholders are like, okay, fine. Like, why are we sitting here talking about this? Like, I need to go back to my desk and work. The obliger is like, well, I'll do it if I think anybody's going to notice. But if nobody's going to notice, maybe I'll just like stick with the old software that I already know how to use. And the rebel's like, I'm not going to bother.
So that is amazing. I love that part of the book, and hearing you just kind of dish it out now was so much fun. Kind of going back to the why of the thing, I believe Ellen Langer had a study in which she asked people to try to get ahead to make copies back in the day when we made copies on copies machines. And it went something like... Is
this because I need to make copies?
Yes.
I know. Yes.
I love this one so much. So the first group said, I'm running late for class. They were the one that got ahead at most of the time. The second group asked, could I please cut ahead of you with no explanation as to why? And the third said, may I please cut ahead of you because I need to make copies. That was the number two. So our brains are really oriented to why, whether we're questioners or not, I believe. Yes. And Simon Sinek famously included that in his TED Talk. I love that. Let's get into something, though, that I think the listeners will really benefit from. And that is, there's a fairly high chance that the listeners who are in relationships with someone whose type is not their own.
Yes.
So I was wondering, as a general rule, not getting into any specific dyad, but what are some of the general principles that can help couples who are trying to navigate these roads where there is a disparity in how they respond to expectation?
Well, just as you made the point that like we need a string quartet, it's often very helpful not to have two people of the same tendency. And typically people are. It's more unusual that you would both match. And so you often see that. But to talk about one specific, because this is by far like the dominant pattern that you see, if one person is a rebel, the other person is probably going to be an obliger. That's the pattern that you see. So now obligers are the type O, which, just like the blood type, they're the most universal. They pair up the most easily with the other three tendencies, and they're the biggest group. And so a lot of times people are paired up with obligers. But if one person is a rebel, it's almost always that the other person is an obliger. And this is partly because questioners and upholders have more conflict with rebels. And often obligers are often excited by the rebels' willingness to just like, oh, you have a really demanding family? We don't have to listen to them. We can have Thanksgiving on our own. Come with me. So they find that really exciting, where questioners and upholders tend not to be as attracted by that. And obligers you see with everybody. The hardest matchup is upholders and rebels. And this is true with parents and children, as well as like married couples or like at work. Because upholders and rebels just see the world in a totally different way. They want to work and operate in a completely different way. Upholders tend to love schedules, and rebels love to have spontaneity. Upholders want to have a plan, and rebels want to be able to throw the plan away. Upholders want to like have everybody agree and like, what are we going to do to execute? And a rebel like wants to do their own thing. And so they just thrive in very different environments. Now, you could have a team that had an upholder and a rebel, and that could be great. But if they're just relying on each other as like a twosome, they probably would experience a lot of conflict. Now, I would never say never because I have met Upholder Rebels teams and Upholder Rebel couples, romantic couples. Typically, if that's the case, this is just funny, right? Like the patterns that you see in human nature.
Yes. So I'm thinking of one myself.
If you see that pattern, they have been together since they were very, very young, or they have a lot of money. When upholders and rebels get together or questioners and rebels get together, it's rare, and it's almost always one of those two things are true. Obligers, so you see with like a wide pattern of people. But the nice thing about once you understand the tendencies is you don't have to take things personally. You understand like, this is just a thing. Okay, so one of the things, and this is funny, about questioners, I'm married to a questioner, is a lot of times questioners don't like to answer questions, which is just kind of this odd quirk, and it's ironic. I get it. It's still annoying to me when I say to my husband something like, where are we going to go to dinner? And he says, a restaurant. I'm like, okay, when? You're like, what time are we leaving? Later. He just doesn't like to answer questions. He's like that with everybody. It's not having to do with me. Or he won't do anything unless he understands why. So there was one day where we had to fill out a boring bureaucratic form as a couple. And I was an upholder. So I was like, I just want to get this done and cross it off the list, right? That's why it's nice to be married to an upholder. So I was filling out the form, but he'd recently changed jobs. So I didn't know his work address. So I called him and I said, hey, Jamie, what's your work address? And he said, why do you want to know? And before I knew about the Four Tendencies, I have to say, this would have really, really annoyed me because I would have been like, obviously, I'm asking for a reason. Why do I have to explain myself? You're just slowing me down. I just want to cross this off the list. Just give me an answer and go. Why does this have to be a discussion? Can't you just accept the fact that I'm not going to ask you unless I have a reason? But now I know he's not going to do anything if he doesn't understand why. So now I say, hey, Jamie, I'm filling out that boring bureaucratic form. What's your work address? Or I say, what time are you going to be home from work? Because I'm wondering if I have time to go to the gym. Because he's not going to answer me. And he's not going to tell me if he doesn't understand why it matters. But when I tell him, which isn't that hard, then he's very cooperative. And so now I don't have to be angry or resentful or annoyed or like think, what does this mean about a relationship? He's a questioner. That's how they do. He's like that with everybody. I benefit tremendously from his questioner tendency often. These are sort of the downsides. But now it seems like it's just sort of, I don't take it personally.
In the sense you're delivering on his love language, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. It's very,
just preloading it.
Speaking his language.
And it's far more efficient. It's ostensibly less efficient because there's more words, but it's far more efficient because you've basically solved for saving 10 minutes of conversation by throwing out 30 seconds.
And here's a way it could work with an obliger, like who's having trouble taking care of themselves, right? Because if you have upholders, questioners, and rebels, and you have an obliger who's really overwhelmed or strained or stretched, and they're not able to sort of take a break, draw boundaries, whatever it is, they can be very uncompassionate about that. And they can be very judgmental and not helpful. But if you know that someone's an obliger, you could say, look, you're exhausted. I can tell. And like, when you're like this, it's hard for me. Like, it hurts my heart to see you so exhausted and drained. You're saying yes to everybody. Come sit on the sofa with me. Let's watch an old funny movie together and like just take a break. You can put down the laptop.
I just heard you say that. You have no idea what happened to me as you. I just love that so much. It was it was like you were singing my favorite song.
Oh, good. That's the love language kind of flavor to it, right?
You absolutely nailed it. That is incredible. And, you know, these cross-cultural relationships are so rewarding ultimately because we get more perspectives. And I actually know of an upholder who was together with a rebel. And as you said, they both had money. You were right.
Good.
And it was so much fun. And this is a person who was in my office. And he loved being with her because she opened up a whole new world. He didn't even know it was possible to do these things. And she showed him it was. And there's a lot of potential richness. Aware of time, I want to ask you my penultimate question for now. Is there anything I should have asked but haven't yet asked? Okay.
I would love to talk about very briefly about Obliger Rebellion.
Please.
Because this is a really common pattern. It's a very common pattern. And it's very mysterious if you don't understand what's happening. Yes. But if you understand it, it's like clear as day. In fact, I was just talking to somebody today who was telling me about her Obliger Rebellion. So Obliger rebellion is when an obliger will meet an expectation, and then suddenly they snap and they say, this I will not do. And sometimes it's small and funny, like, I'm not going to answer your emails for 2 weeks. But sometimes it's very dramatic, like, I'm going to get a divorce after 30 years of marriage without ever kind of really even mentioning divorce before. I'm going to quit my job today. I'm walking out the door today. I'm leaving today. I'm going to break off a 25-year friendship. And the thing is, if you don't know about Obliger Rebellion, people will often say, this came out of the blue. I made one little comment and they like flipped out. It doesn't make any sense. It's irrational. It's disproportionate. But if you know about Obliger Rebellion, you can see it coming a mile away. Building anger, building resentment, people acting out of character. People will say to me, usually I love to work, but lately I've been spending hours doing online shopping at my desk at work. Okay, you're acting out of character. You're acting like you feel resentment and anger. What? And Obliger Rebellion happens when an obliger feels neglected, taken advantage of, exploited, unheard. And it's meant to protect the obliger by blowing up a situation. You can't take this anymore. Expectations are too unreasonable, too high. So Obliger Rebellion sets in to explode the situation, get you out of it, to protect you. It does, and it can be protective. Sometimes it's really, really important, but it can also be very destructive. And it can make no sense to the people around you. And so it's much better to know about Obliger Rebellion and see that it's coming and say, oh my gosh, we don't want to trip your Obliger Rebellion. What do we do to relieve expectations, to make you feel heard, to alleviate? Everybody else is on 3 committees. Why are you on 10 committees? Why are you doing all of the drudge work travel? That's not fair. Sometimes people will say, well, it's hard for me to stand up for myself, but I'll stand up for other people. I'm like, march into your manager and say, this isn't fair. This person has too much of a burden, because we don't want to lose this very valuable person. And we might if they blow up. Or like with a family, it's like, if you don't protect yourself from Obliger Rebellion, you might exit that situation altogether. And that would be a tremendous loss. Once you know about Obliger Rebellion, you will see it everywhere. Think of the movie, It's a Wonderful Life. That is the story of Obliger Rebellion.
For sure. As you mentioned, in the book, that was a brilliant thing to bring up right now, because it is such a common, and it sounds like one of the ways that we need to learn how to say no. We need to learn how to be assertive. All of those things are probably super important to just not have that relationship ending after 30 years. This is the final straw that broke the camel's back moment.
But the thing is, sometimes people will say to the obliger, well, you should draw better boundaries. You should learn to say no. And I'm like, but obligers, that's not their strength. You have to help them. Like, how are they going to do that? Like, you have to like sort of put that framework in place as an obliger. Like, it can take some work to figure that out. Like, you have to really think it through. As an upholder, I used to really bother me when I was working on habits where people would say like, well, I take care of myself because like my children depend on me. And I'm like, take care of yourself for yourself. You don't have to drag your children into it. Just do it because it's right for you. But now I understand, no, that's a very helpful thing for obligers to think, because they're like, I have to take care of myself because others depend on me. That is the way that they are taking care of themselves. They need that outer accountability. So why should I try to dissuade them from that? That's a very useful way to think for an obliger, even though I, as an upholder, feel like, well, you should do it for yourself. That's what works for an upholder.
But you nailed it, and I did need training. So
yeah, I mean, right?
No question. I needed that scaffolding for sure.
Yes, it's very easy to hand wave it, but it has to be very deliberately put into place.
It's like learning a second language in many ways. Well, my ultimate question, Gretchen, if you had the power to confer upon all humanity one insight or skill that would dramatically improve the lives of the individual, and since we're all connected, perhaps those around that individual, what would that insight or skill be, and how do you imagine it would impact that individual as well as society at large?
Ooh, what a thought-provoking question. Ooh, there's such a large menu I would like to choose from, but I think it would have to be meaningful connection, like the ability to have a meaningful connection, meaning put yourself at risk, be vulnerable, be willing to be awkward, put yourself out there, have a little bit of goofy unself-consciousness, be curious about other people, be willing to like stretch out a hand. Yeah, I think if everybody could have meaningful connections, we would have a much happier world.
I love that. I'm thinking about one of my favorite quotes from last year. It came from a distinguished psychology professor at Clark University, James Cordova. I asked him, he'd written a book on intimacy. I asked him, well, define intimacy. And he said, it's vulnerability met well. And you're speaking to that as well. And
vulnerability meant well. Yes.
Vulnerability met well. So if you show up with your vulnerability, or I show up with my vulnerability, we both know that it will be well met by the other. And it's just, that is just lovely. And that's kind of what you're concise. Also suggesting. And
yes,
I am so grateful that you're investing your heartbeats to help people in this way. I think your contributions are outstanding. The Four Tendencies is a must read. I do see the world differently.
Good. It gets into your head, right?
It really did. Yes. As evidenced by the fact that I couldn't even see my Parks and Recreation people who I know so well for so many years. It's so much fun, folks. You're going to have a blast. And one of the things that you mentioned, I just want to let the listener know, is it also helps us get out of the trappings of our personality type. It's not meant to pigeonhole us or box us in.
Yes.
It is meant for us to emancipate from the trappings that would otherwise keep us from living fuller lives.
Exactly.
So I think this is a great contribution. Gretchen, thanks so much for meeting with me and sharing your wisdom with my listeners.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed the conversation so much. I feel like we could talk all day.
Ditto. This is Dr. Adam Dorsay, thanking you for listening to SuperPsyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.